Hi, guys, and welcome back to the Verified Podcast. This is your girl, Gabby, and welcome back. It's been a while. I know it's been a while. It's been about 3 months, okay? So take it easy on me, okay? But I've missed you guys, and I hope that you have missed the content just as much as I have missed creating the content. But this is the Verified Podcast, where unlike our social media accounts, we don't require a sticker by our names. We don't require the validation or the accolades, although the accolades are welcomed. Because we know who we are. We know who God has created us to be, and we don't compromise on our purpose. We don't compromise on who God has created us to be, and we walk in that every single day of our lives. And so that's what this podcast is about, and it's also about fitness. It's also about helping you to become the best version of yourself through your fitness. We all know that you only get one body, so it's important that you take care of your body. It's important that you are putting the right foods into your body. It's important that you know how to move through your body. And so that's a part of my purpose. That's who I am. That's what I do. I am a full-time personal trainer. And so I am certified to talk about these things. I'm certified to give you advice about your fitness goals. And so this is who we are. And let's go ahead and let's jump straight into the show, because I have some things that I want to share with you guys. And yeah, so let's go ahead and let's get into it. So as I mentioned earlier, the podcast has been down for about 3 months now. I have not been creating content for it. Today is actually the very first podcast that I have created since about, I think it was March. So I am excited to be back, but I honestly, I got into a place of where I was not feeling my most confident. I was not feeling motivated. And I think a lot of that was coming from me just having a lot going on. So not only am I a trainer where my hours are really crazy, sometimes I'm working 12 to 15 hours a day. And then on top of that, I'm also planning for a wedding in September. And so I have a lot going on. And with all of that, I was not being the best planner that I should have been. And I just became super overwhelmed, and I decided to take a break. And I know that oftentimes it's preached that, you know, you have to work even when you don't feel like it, and, you know, all of that stuff. And I do believe that that is true, but I also believe in taking a rest and taking a break and knowing when to step back, especially if it's led by God. And I think sometimes we get overwhelmed because it could be that we're moving outside of God's timing. With some things. And so I knew that for me, I needed to take a step back. I needed to regroup. I needed to create systems that would be conducive for where I was with all that I have going on. Right. And so I think that that's important. It's okay to change things up. And so that's actually going to bring us into some of the announcements that we have for the podcast going forward. So I've decided to make a few changes to the podcast. The first housekeeping thing that's going to change is the length of the podcast. So whereas I was doing about 20 minutes per podcast, I'm actually going to cut that in half to be about 10 to 12 minutes long. And honestly, that was one of the things that kind of overwhelmed me in the beginning, was me feeling like I had to sit down for at least an hour and a half to record a 20-minute podcast. And that's just not something that is feasible for my schedule right now. So podcasts are going to be shorter. But the great thing about that is that I wanted to create something that was not me rambling, but something that was going to be really short, really concise, and really powerful enough to get you throughout your entire week. And that's really the biggest change that we have thus far. And that change, that 10 minutes, is pivotal for me because, again, going back to my schedule, I just don't have the time. I wish I did. And I will whenever I go completely entrepreneurial. But until that time comes, I really have to make sure that I'm using my time wisely. And so I would be remiss if I did not give you guys some tools for some things that I learned while I was going through that season of lack of motivation, and how I kind of got through it, and learning some places where I lacked. And so I think that my philosophy is that, I'm never the only person who is going through something. If I have faced it, I'm pretty sure that there are also some people out there who are going through the same thing, and you don't see a way out. And so I believe that a part of my job is to help you see your way out of whatever you're going through. So let's go ahead, and now I'm going to give you guys a few things that I learned throughout my process. So for one, the biggest thing that I had to realize is that it's okay to change my mind to fit my current reality. And I think that when we think about changing our mind, it's less about us, but it becomes more about other people. Oh, what are other people going to think of me? They're going to think I'm indecisive. And so it becomes less about what you need and what you want. And so I think that you have to bring it back to yourself and understand that it is okay to change your mind, especially if what you are dealing with does not fit your current reality. And truthfully, whenever I started the podcast, I wanted to do all the things. I wanted to post weekly. I wanted to have the podcast fit into my schedule perfectly, but it did not. And it became unrealistic for me to keep up with it. So for that reason, I had to shorten it. It does not mean that I gave up on it, but I had to make some changes, and I had to be able to shift and maneuver to a new normal. And so I feel like if you're going through a place of where you're trying to make something fit, but it's not fitting, and you know that God has called you to do it, it may be that you need to do some maneuvering. It may be that you need to change up some systems, or that you may need to change the timing or do some readjusting, but it does not mean that you have to quit on what you have started. It just means that it does not meet or fit your current reality. So try and find a way for it to become your new normal, but in a new and in a better way that's going to be conducive for where you are in your current season. The second part is learning to plan ahead. And this is probably the most important aspect for me because, again, I was recording the podcast weekly, but what really stumped me is that I was not planning ahead. I knew what I was going to talk about, but I should have pre-recorded and there are just a few other things that I could have done to secure myself a little bit better that I did not do. Hindsight 2020, now I'm going to start doing that, but I failed the first time, so now I get a chance to go back and make it up. But anyway, it's important that you plan for circumstances to arise and that you also plan for your feelings to come up, okay? And what I mean by that is that things are going to come up. I don't know anyone's schedule who is just like clockwork each and every hour of the day. Things come up, circumstances come up. And so you have to be able to plan and maneuver around things that come up in everyday life. Another thing is that you also have to plan for your feelings, because feelings are a very real thing, and it's not going to be all the time that you feel like doing what has to be done. It's not going to be that you feel like recording or you feel like working out. You're not going to always feel like doing those things. So when that time comes, it is important that you try and press through, but it's also important that you plan for those feelings to show up, so that when they do show up, that you have a strategy for that and a strategy to kind of get yourself to another level of where you're either going to push through it or you're going to do something else that works for you to kind of get you to the same goal or to the same result. And the very last thing that I learned throughout this process is learning how to be realistic with my expectations and my desired outcome. And one of the biggest things that God has shown me is that if I am not realistic in my expectations and what I desire, then no fruit can be born from that. And what that means is that I have to carefully assess what I have on my plate right now. It would make no sense for me to add something that is only going to make me unproductive in all areas of my life. life. And so I think that when we think about adding something to our plate, that we really have to consider what I have on my plate right now, and is this realistic for me to take on? And I think that when we take on additional things that are not meant for us in this season, then it's so easy to become overwhelmed, because that's something that God never meant for you to be holding in this season. And so God has a plan for you, and he wants you to be productive, but you can only be productive with what he has assigned to you in this season. And so those are the three top things that I learned over this process. Number one is being okay with changing your mind. Number two, planning ahead. And number three, be realistic with your expectations. And I hope that this has blessed you. I will be coming out with more fitness things. Don't worry. I know that this was not fitness based, but I really wanted to talk to you about what's going on in my life